Facebook. Yeah, they're all comments, banners. Okay, which one? Oh, all right. Well, it is what it is. Okay, that's shot. All right, how's it going, everyone? Not sure how many people are going to be able to jump on right now. It's a very last-minute session. I'm going to be doing, excuse me, on color mixing, color matching, color blending a bit. Not blending, color matching and color mixing. I get lots of people asking me over and over around how to mix colors together. A lot of people end up with having mixing too much paint and how that can be problematic. Hi, Deb. How's it going? How's it going? How's it going? Thank you for joining in. Again, this is a very last-minute quick tutorial I'm going to be making around color mixing. The way that I mix colors, over time, I kind of developed a way for me that works for me where I waste very little paint. Oftentimes, people, will tell me, "Hey, Jesse, I made this big old giant batch of paint, didn't match the color that I wanted, didn't get the color that I wanted, and I ended up tossing out a bunch of paint." So I've got a little painting over here on the side that we did last week in the membership group. I'm gonna use some red and some yellow to mix the oranges that are in that pumpkin. Okay, so I'm gonna use a little bit of these colors there and a little bit of white perhaps to mix the oranges that we see in here. And there's a few different shades. We got kind of a light orange, almost yellow orange. We got a medium orange, and then a darker orange. So I'm going to teach you guys how I go through the steps in mixing a color. And if there's a little time, maybe we'll even get into mixing some of that background purple. But I've got three primary colors in here, the three primary colors. There's only three. We got primary yellow, primary red, and a primary blue on my plate. From these colors, you can mix every color out there. I've got some white. I don't have any black on the plate. I don't think I'll need it, but I do have some black handy just in case. But anyway, we're going to go through and I'm going to teach you guys how I do it. Again, how I go about mixing my colors. These are techniques that you guys can use whenever you're mixing your colors. So what you're going to want to have right now, if you're going to be following along, is just a couple of basic brushes. I've got a mixed media pad here. And of course, I just showed you guys my paints. Paper towels are very important. Always good to have a bunch of extra towels because we use them to clean the paints or the brushes, but also to clean up messes, right? So anyway, who's on here with me right now? What's happening, Diane? Paint management is a tough one for sure. My big thing around paint management is I just get really messy with it. My style is a little bit more of a loose style. My palettes end up with paint all over the place, but that works for me. The part that was tricky at the beginning when I first started to paint was quantities and paint matching and stuff like that. So we're gonna talk about that. But let's see who's on here. Silvana, what's happening? How are you? Catherine, hi from New York. J.R. Bennett, how's it going? Okay, cool. So we got a few people watching right now. This is going to be saved. This is going to be saved in case some of you guys want to catch this later. But here we go. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take one of my flat brushes here, basic flat brush. A brush was sitting in my water cup. So let me, I actually used my paints a little bit ago and used these brushes. So they're still a little bit dirty. Let me clean that up a bit. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take, I know that yellow and red make orange. Okay. So again, I've got a primary red here. I've got a primary yellow, and I'm going to start mixing. There's a few different hues of orange in here, even a little bit of yellow. So you got some variations of color in there, similar color in that pumpkin. So I'm going to start with what I see as the medium tone or the color that's right in the center. Okay. So whenever I'm going to mix a color, I always start with the brighter color first, the lighter of the two colors. And I start with a little bit of paint. I don't take all my paint and move it over, or I don't take all of this and start mixing paint right into it. I start with a little bit of paint at a time, Once I have the color that I want, then I worry about the quantity. But the first step is getting the color right and then adding paint to mix for the right quantity. It's always better to mix more paint than to run out of paint partway through, because having to remix your paint to match your color that you made previously can be problematic. Okay, so again, a little bit of paint. I know my base, or one of the colors that we use in mixing orange, is yellow. Then what I'll do is I'll take the deeper color, or the stronger of the two colors, and add a little bit at a time. Okay, red is a very strong color. When you compare it to yellow, very quickly it'll overpower it. So we use a little bit at a time. As I'm mixing, what I'll do is when I feel the color is close, I'll take the brush and I'll come over and bring it close to my painting, right up to it. Is that the color that I want? That's a pretty good color. It's pretty close to it in the middle. So it's my middle value, my middle darkest orange in the painting. Now the colors that I used in here, I actually used pre-mixed orange. In other words, I bought tubes of Liquitex. I have cadmium orange, I've got cadmium yellow, I've got primary yellow. I use those colors in this painting. I didn't mix them from primary colors. Okay, so here you're kind of getting a little bit of a mixing technique session, along with a mixing of quantities. How much do you mix when you're mixing paint? So there's my medium value, or what I think is my medium value. So I just kind of do that. That's what I'll be using for that medium value. The next thing I want to do is I want to mix for quantity. So I know I'm going to need more than this if I was going to make a pumpkin of that size. So now I start to bring over more yellow. I mix it in. I know I'm going to need a little bit of red, right? Kind of similar to the same ratios as I used when I first made the mixture. And this could tone or change the color a little bit in either direction. It can make it more red. It can make it more orange. All good. As long as I stay close and I just keep coming over and checking with the painting, I'm good. Okay, now if this was the color that I'm going to use for my midtones, my mid value, then that's what I would just keep making more of this till I feel like I've got enough. Again, it is better to end up with more paint than to end up with too little. As I start to paint the pumpkin, and I'm not going to go through and paint the entire thing, I'm just going to kind of give you guys a quick session on how to do that, how to just about mixing colors right now. Once I have the color and the quantity, I could go through and add the paint. This would be my base color. Then I would come back over and mix my other colors, my light shade, my darker shade, or my lightest value, my darkest value, and then apply those. I could also, before I start applying any paint to the canvas, I could come in and mix my lightest value paint and my darkest value paint and have them all set up at the same time. Either of those approaches is perfectly fine. Again, I could start with this, apply it to my painting. Okay, for example, I could come in there and start drawing, painting in my pumpkin. Or I could go ahead and pre-mix the other colors that I'm going to be using. So for example, my lighter color, I could grab what's on the brush and I could bring it over here. Just place it there. Of course, that color matches that, right? Let me clean my brush here for a moment. Then I'll take more of the yellow. Okay, excuse me 1 second while I reach over and grab some more of my yellow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a lighter value of this orange. Okay, now I need less of this color because it's not all over the pumpkin. There's less of this than that medium value color. So I go ahead and I mix it. Obviously, this is a lot higher in value than that, or it's lighter than that. And I'll come over and I'll do this. Is that good enough for the lightest values on the pumpkin? And it is. I don't need a lot of this. Okay. And then what I'll do is it looks like I have at least 3 different values of this orange in that painting. So I'll make a third that's darker. So I'll take some of this, a little bit of this, bring it over. Some of this yellow over and add a little bit more red. So this is going to be my darkest orange. Okay, So here I've got three colors. I've got my medium value, my highest value, or brightest, lightest value, and then the darkest. Okay, again, I would look at this and go, is that enough paint to cover the entire shape, size, area of pumpkin that I'm going to be making? Okay, so I start with those three values and I go from there. I can make more. I can make four values. Do I think there's a fourth color in there somewhere? If I do, then I go ahead and make it. Again, we're talking about just the face of that pumpkin. So I'm going to go ahead and start. Again, I'm not going to paint the entire thing. I just want to show you guys how I approach this. Again, a rule of thumb for me is to mix more paint than what I'm going to need. It's really hard to mix the exact amount that you're going to be needing. More likely than not, you're going to end up running out of paint partway through, and then you have to make some more. If you have to make more, if you mix the paint, obviously if you've got the paint color already mixed in a tube and you're just using it out of a tube, that doesn't matter. You can go a little bit at a time. But when you're mixing a color, it's important that you make enough, because if you run out, let's say I'm going through painting the pumpkin and I run out partway through, having to make more of that color can be tough. Matching a color. This is much more important when you're painting like a person. If you're making a portrait of somebody and you've mixed some color to match their skin tone, and you've got it, you've matched it up, you're good to go. You're painting and you run out partway through. That is a pain to have to go back and mix more paint to match. Okay. Anyway, so I've got my medium value paint right here. That's what I'm going to start with. Some people like to start with their darkest value first. Some people like to start with their lightest value first. I usually will start with my medium. Put that down. I'm going to make a small one here. I'm not going to make a giant pumpkin. Just a real quick session here on how I go about mixing my colors. Now I'm doing this on a mixed media pad. I did not put a layer of gesso on my pad. I often will. It just makes the paint flow a little bit better, makes it work a little bit more like a canvas does. As I'm applying paint here to the pumpkin, what I like to do is I like to follow the shape of the pumpkin as I work the paint around. I could paint everything in one direction, and I could even go sideways, but that's going to make for a much flatter pumpkin. It's not going to have any dimension or depth. By curving my brush strokes with the shape of that pumpkin, I get a better overall finish, a little bit more realism in my painting. So here in the center, my brush strokes are a little more, they're more up and down, straighter. As I start working my way over to the edges, they start to curve. Again, with the perspective, but the curvature of that surface. Okay, if I'm standing right in front of the pumpkin, my brush strokes are straighter. If I'm looking over to the side, they tend to be a little more curved. Okay. So again, we're not painting the whole thing. I'm just kind of going through and doing a quick tutorial on how I mix paints. One, to color match, but also to paint enough or to make enough to cover a painting. Trying not to overdo it where we end up with a whole bunch of paint. Although that's a better alternative, like I said, than running out of paint part way. Let's see here. What's happening? Nada Sanders from Mississippi and Barbara. How's it going? Is that Montana, Missouri? Oh, Missouri. Got to get my glasses on. Okay. Sounds good, Catherine. I do have a tutorial on brush use. Okay. There's a tutorial in the library here under Painting with Jesse on brush use, which brushes to use when. Very important. You can mix and match brushes, right? You can use various brushes for the same thing, but there are some brushes that are most definitely better suited for other things. So, hi, Ruth. How's it going? All right. Okay, so this is drying pretty quickly. I've got a mixed media pad. Actually, I did put gesso on it. I'm sorry, I did put gesso on it. It helps it. It works a little bit more like a canvas does when you gesso a mixed media pad. Let me take a blow dryer here really quickly and help this paint dry. So for those of you that have never tried it, if you use a mixed media pad like this, what I often will do is add a layer of gesso on it to it makes it work a little bit more like a canvas. It doesn't absorb the water from the paint. When you paint with acrylics, because it's watery, an untreated mixed media pad sometimes will warp. Even with some of the thicker mixed media pads, will warp a little bit when you apply paint to it. By adding a layer of gesso, you can avoid a lot of that. Okay, that's a big help. What's up, Angeli? From Puerto Rico. What's happening, Angeli? How are you? Okay, so let's go ahead and continue now. Now that that's our first layer, it's nice and dry. I can add another layer of paint now. So in this case, I could go with my my darkest value and start adding some of the shadows. Okay, I'm using Liquitex paints. They're a little bit heavy bodied and they dry kind of quickly, but there's shadowing over on this side. Okay, so here I go. I just start to apply some of this stuff right in here. Before I even apply any of the shadows, I could go in there and add those dark brown lines for the segments, right? That could be a next step before I apply any shading, any of the shadows. But it doesn't make too much of a difference. Either approach is just fine. Okay, so I got some shadows down in here. And again, if you notice, I'm brushing following the curvature of my pumpkin. Very important. It gives it that depth. And I can so I watered down my paint a little bit. And that thins it out a bit, makes it a little bit lighter. And then I can take some of this and come up the middle a little. Lighter part of my pumpkin is up on top, and down here is where the darkest areas are. And if it's not dark enough, I can always mix some more on the fly. I can take a little bit more red, a touch of yellow. Again, folks, we're not doing the entire pumpkin tutorial here. We're just teaching you guys a little bit around how I approach color matching and color mixing. Okay, so here, if I want some darker paint, right, again, I can mix it on the fly. I don't have to have all of my colors mixed beforehand. Acrylic paint tends to dry very quickly, and if you mix too many of your colors too soon and you're not using them till way later in the painting session, they can dry out on you, and then you're back to square one. I do have a wet palette that I sometimes use to avoid that, but I don't use it very often. Wet palettes do help keep your paint nice and wet, especially when you've mixed a color itself. Very important. You got it, Angeli. All right. So what I am going to do really quickly before I add any of the highlights, I'm going to go ahead and just mix a little bit of brown. Now, red, yellow, and blue will get you brown. So I'm going to take a little bit of blue. Actually, I'm going to start with my yellow, right? I said I usually start with my light colors. I usually do. So I'm going to grab some yellow, bring it over. Next darkest color is my red. So I'm going to take a little bit of that, put it over to the side. Then I got my blue right there. So I start adding a little bit of my red to my yellow. Take a little bit of this blue, mix all three together. Sometimes you have to add more red, sometimes a little bit more yellow, but eventually color turns brown. There we go. Got a nice brown color right there. Your primary colors, red, yellow, and blue, will get you every color under the sun. Well, with few exceptions. Your traditional paint colors. You use white and black to lighten or darken any color after you've made your mix. Okay, so there's some brown right there. Now I could add a little bit of black to make it darker. I could add some red to change it up. And just really quickly, I'm going to go through here. I'm going to use my little number 2 flat brush. Okay, I'm going to make my little lines here. Looks like I need this to be a little bit darker, but for now this works. Of course, we'd have some eyes down the middle there. Or not the middle. Eyeball here, eyeball there. Not really worried about that right now. Okay. Just going to go through and outline the outside a bit. Okay, so now I'm just going to do a quick touch test here. Make sure everything's nice and dry. I didn't have to take my blow dryer to it. Now I will take my lighter color. Okay, switching to a different flat brush. Now I think it's going to need to be a little bit lighter, so I'm going to take a little bit more yellow. Again, you can mix on the fly, right? If your color, you need to change up your color, you need to make an adjustment, you can do that. Okay, you're going to need a little bit more yellow. That's not bright enough. Okay, there we go. I like that color right there, and I'm just going to come over. So got some highlights on the right side of my pumpkin, highlights near the top. Maybe right in here. So again, in this case, I started with my medium value color first. Then I added the darker value for the shadows. And now I'm at the lightest values next. And again, you can change these up a bit. Some people prefer to do their darkest value first and then go to the medium values and then the lightest value. Okay, so you'll get some similar results. Subtle changes, subtle differences. It really depends on what you're going for. But that is basically how it works. Oh, I still have some yellow. I was about to scoop up some more yellow here, but I still have some on my plate. So now I'm just going to grab a little bit of yellow. Come up here. Maybe we got a little bit of a light reflecting from the top. So it's going to be brighter over the top. Okay. If I let this dry some and I come back and add more yellow over the top of that, or even if I take some white, mix it in with some yellow to really create some highlights, I can add those to the top and that'll further add more depth. Okay. So if I look at it, again, I always say, take a little step back, look at your painting from a distance. What does it need? Maybe you need a little more shadow down in here. Okay. So I would simply take more red, since I've got a little bit of, not more red, but more orange. Since I've got a little bit of brown on the plate, we can use that. Okay, give me a sec. Okay, so this brown right here, before it dries out on this, I'm going to grab a little bit of water. Mix that water right into that. I'm going to take a little bit of this orange here. Now I'll come in here and maybe over on this edge. Okay. Maybe towards the bottom also. Okay. So something like that. And then, of course, we'd go through and add the stems and the eyebrows and all that other good stuff. I could even at this stage, once this is dry, I could come in with some white paint over that to put down the first layer for the eyeballs, for the eyes. Let that dry a bit. I'd probably add a second layer of white. Then I'd be able to go in and add the pupils and the outlines and put in eyebrows and stems and everything else. But color mixing can be tricky. You always want to start with a little bit of paint. So kind of a recap, you start with just small quantities of paint. Slowly, you start with a lighter color and you start to introduce a darker color to it. Once you get to the color that you want, then you mix for quantity. Okay, if you try to do everything all at once, that's where you tend to make a mistake and kind of lose track of what's going on, mix too much, and then end up having to throw paint away. A couple of things, let's say you're going along and you're mixing paint. You're going through and the color that you have is way too much. Let's say, for example, I'm over here with some blue and some red, and I'm trying to go for a nice, like a really pretty lavender or something. And I've got this really deep color. I'm way off. What I can do is if I think I can use some of that, if it works, I'll grab a little bit of it and I'll bring it over to a different part of my palette. Then I'll start with that. I'll start mixing to that little bit. I won't continue mixing here. If I continue mixing here, I'm more than likely just going to end up with a big pile of wasted paint. So if you're close, but you're just, or you can use a little bit of it, you would take a little bit, move it over to the side and start with that again. Sometimes you're so far off that it's just better to start from scratch. Okay. So this kind of stuff takes practice. Color mixing, color creating can be a little tricky. So always practice, take your time, start with little quantities, a little bit at a time. And again, once you've got the color that you want, then from there, you start to increase the quantity. Okay. But anyway, folks, I just wanted to jump on here and give you guys a little bit of a background on how I go about mixing paint. Hopefully that is, helpful to some of you. And if you guys have any questions, make sure you guys send me questions or put them in the comments. The tutorial is just about done. I wasn't trying to tease anybody and make you think that we're going to paint that whole thing. I just wanted to use that as my reference to color match and then to teach you a little bit around how I go about mixing those colors. But all right, everybody. So again, if you guys have any questions, put them down in the comments. I see a bunch of people saying hello. So hello to all of you. And I just want to thank you guys. I know it's kind of a last minute thing, but you guys can always send me messages directly. Okay. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. I will see you all very soon. Bye-bye. You got it, Diane. Leslie, my pleasure. Guadalupe, how's it going? Guadalupe, haven't seen you for a minute. Yeah, it's pretty cool, Diane. I know. Cool little painting. Fun little piece. A little basic, simple, where we learned about shading and, some light to dark or dark to light. Skinny lines. Cool little piece. But okay, everyone. Thank you all for joining in. See you soon. Bye-bye.